Thank you for participating in Morehead at Home Skywatching, hosted by Morehead Planetarium and Science Center. My name is Amy Sale, and I'm an educator at Morehead. We are a unit of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, located on campus. We also work throughout the state of North Carolina through a variety of science outreach initiatives like our mobile lab vans, our summer camp programs, and the annual North Carolina Science Festival. Our mission is to help people better understand science, technology, and health, and we do this through engaging learning opportunities like this live virtual event. We're happy to have you with us today. Our theme is Anyone Out There, and Nick will get us started.
Hey everybody, it's Nick from Morehead Planetarium here. We're excited to be with you today, and I just wanted to say we miss you. We miss seeing you in our full dome theater. We miss seeing you at your schools. So we hope that these virtual events are doing a little bit at least to help you understand a bit more about the universe around us. So I am very excited about this topic that we have today because it's one of the most common questions that we get in our planetarium work. Do aliens exist? Is there life out there beyond the Earth? So I know Amy and I are really excited to talk to you about it today. But before we jump in, I want to give you a couple of ground rules and housekeeping things. Number one, if you have questions throughout this process, as you might, there is a good way to ask those, and that's using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom bar. So if you have something you'd like to ask, type it in the Q&A, and then after we do our presentation, we're going to take some time to try to answer some of those questions. So at any time you can type in there, but we'll address them towards the end. Also, to show you our sky and how that's connected to this topic, we're going to be using a program called Stellarium. If you've been with us before for these sessions, it's a free open source software that you can download for almost any device, and it's sort of like a flat screen planetarium. It's a way to simulate how the night sky looks at any time of the day. So you can find it at stellarium.org if you ever want to try to follow along yourself. But what I'm going to do for us is actually set up our screen so that you all can see it. So you should be seeing a kind of funny looking window with a big hemisphere of blue with some green on either side. This is our daytime sky. So first things first, I know you're curious about our topic and how we're going to approach it, but I wanted to hear from you. We have a poll question for you that's going to kind of test the waters of what you think about has life been confirmed anywhere other than our Earth? So we're going to pop this question up for you real quick, and you can answer, and that way we'll kind of get an idea of what y'all think. So the way the question reads is true or false. Life has been discovered somewhere besides on Earth. So just take a second. Give us your idea of whether that statement is true or false. Because like I said, this is a big question. This is something that young folks and old folks alike ask us all the time. And I love connecting it to the science that we know about. And that's kind of what we're going to try to do here today. So I'll just give you another couple moments. Pick your true or false. And we'll see if we have some results. Okay, here we go. True or false, life has been discovered somewhere besides on Earth. It looks like about 59% of us said true, and about 41% of us said false. So that's pretty even split. I think that's really interesting. Now, turns out that we do have an answer for this one. And we'll be asking some more kind of opinion type questions a little bit later, but it turns out that life has not been discovered somewhere else other than on our Earth. But that doesn't mean it's not possible. So there's no evidence. Part of what we do in science is base our conclusions off of evidence. And as exciting as it is to think about life existing somewhere else, we don't have concrete evidence. So we're going to look at some of the options for where life might exist and what it takes. So I want to start off by thinking about kind of like a loose definition of life. It's hard because there's many different forms of life that we see here on Earth, and they all kind of behave differently. Life involves a biological process. A lot of times that means things like moving and growing and reproducing and exchanging gases and chemicals. So that can look very different, whether it's something as complex as a human being or something as simple as a bacteria. Those things are both alive. So when we talk about what's needed for life, it kind of depends on what type of life you're talking about. But there are some types of general things that we can look for out there in the universe. Things like liquid water, things like an atmosphere. We know that many forms of life here on Earth need our atmosphere. There are certain types of extreme life, extremophiles, that live in really hot or really cold temperatures, but it's probably more likely that a good middle sort of temperature is more conducive to life. So I just want y'all to kind of think about some of these criteria as we discover some of these things in our solar system and beyond. But to do that, I think we actually have to roll forward to our nighttime sky. So this is the daytime. You notice down here at the bottom of your screen, there's a clock that tells us that it's the year 2020, May 7th, and it's a little after 10 a.m. So if you happen to be watching this later, that's okay. But for now, we're gonna go with real time, but we're speeding it up. So as I move time forward, it's gonna look a lot like the sun moves across the sky. As you might remember, really what's happening is the Earth is turning. Our Earth is rotating. So as we spin around, kind of like we begin facing away from the sun, and it appears to move throughout the sky. So we'll speed that on up and have ourselves a sunset, and we'll keep our eyes peeled for one really, really bright object in the western sky, kind of over on the right-hand side of your screen here, right after the sunset. So here we are. Okay. So I don't know about you, Amy, but I saw something really bright pop out right up here.
Oh yeah, look at that. Planet Venus. I sure hope you all have seen Venus in the early evening sky lately. It is going to vanish in the glare of the sun over the next few weeks. So definitely take a look. If you like to go on early evening walks, you can see it very soon after sunset. Venus is very bright. And Nick, I wonder if we could zoom in and take a look at Venus.
Sure, we're looking for life. Let's get close. Here we go.
Let's see if Venus looks like a good candidate or not. And one thing interesting is that you'll notice Venus does go through phases, similar to how our moon does. So it looks like a crescent right now. It is covered in a thick cloud layer. In the past, Venus was different than it is now. Venus is often talked of as Earth's twin. It has a lot of similarity, similar size and mass and so on, but it's really, at least now, Earth's evil twin. It's not impossible. There's some evidence that there could potentially be microbial life in the atmosphere, but and Venus does move around as the time goes on in our view there. There we go. But it is a hostile place, probably not our best candidate to look for life. And I don't recommend it as a vacation destination either. The atmospheric pressure would crush you at the surface. The air is toxic for humans for sure. And the high temperature today is close to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. So I think Venus is probably not our best bet for life in our own solar system. So we might want to move on. Maybe, Nick, we could take a look at our closest neighbor to Earth, the moon, which is rising over there. I'm going to stay up a little bit later to get it a little bit higher.
Yeah,
and the moon is full, just mention that. It's full today, so it'll be up all night tonight.
Yeah, so hopefully you had clear skies last night to get a little bit of moon gazing yourselves. But as Amy said, this is our closest neighbor. So one of the things that humans love to do is look for things that are like us. And that gives us the idea that, if life exists somewhere else, maybe it exists close by. So let's zoom in on the moon and talk a little bit about the possibilities here. Humans have been to the moon and explored its surface. We've done lots of observation from space and from direct contact with the astronauts. But it turns out that the moon is a pretty barren place. It does have a very thin atmosphere. It does have a solid surface, which is one of those important things when we're looking for things like us. And there even is some thought that there could be water on the moon, not giant lakes or oceans or anything like that, but maybe frozen ice deep within craters or near the North and South poles. So we think it might have some of the ingredients, and that's one of the reasons we want to go back to the moon. Even though it's barren, maybe we can look for some of those extremophile bacteria and things like that that could live on the moon. But as of now, no evidence for life on the moon, but it's one of those more attainable hypotheses. Maybe since it's close to us, we can get a better description, a better body of evidence that some type of life exists on the moon. Hasn't been confirmed. It's an interesting thought, though, especially since it's our closest neighbor. I don't think I'd want to live on the moon, though, unfortunately. So if you get a chance, try to go out and look at the moon this evening. I hope it's clear where you are because it's really beautiful right now. It's a great way to connect with your sky and your family at this time. So we'll say bye to the moon for now. There are missions planned to go back to the moon, and maybe some of these same questions are what we'll be exploring when we go back. Solar system is a big place, and the universe is a big place. So let's just move along. We'll make it a little bit later in the evening and see if we can find some other candidates.
So for those of you out right after it gets dark, look for Venus and the moon. The moon will be very bright because it's full. And then if you're willing to stay up later, you get 3 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars.
Exactly. So here in our Stellarium sky, they're labeled. But in your real early morning sky, you might notice at the bottom of your screen here, this is about 4:30, 4:38 exactly a.m. So I know that's a time when most of us are asleep. But if you're an early riser or a serious night owl, you could get a glimpse of these planets too. They won't have the labels on them, unfortunately. But they will be bright, and for the most part, they'll be shining steadily. So if you're ever unsure whether something is a planet or a star, I always check to see if it's twinkling. And that's a good indication that maybe you're looking at reflected planet light instead of starlight that's coming from really, really far away. But let's kind of just go in order here for how they popped up above the horizon and talk about the king of the planets, Jupiter. So you might know, as we zoom in here, that Jupiter is a gas giant. It does not have a solid surface. And for some reason, it's just wanting to move along here. So I'm actually going to do one thing for us. Sorry to take you back and forth a little bit here, but I'm going to zoom in and try not to click so it'll stay where I want it to. There we go. Jupiter doesn't have a solid surface. It's made almost completely of gases and liquids. Deep within it, it's thought to have a solid core, but if you ever got down to that solid core of Jupiter, you'd be crushed by the pressure. So not a place where we can go stand. There are some ideas, and folks back in the 70s and 80s, like Carl Sagan, loved to hypothesize that maybe there were some sort of flying creatures within the atmospheres of Jupiter and things like that. We don't have any evidence of that, but it's still kind of a fun sci-fi idea to think about. What I think is a little more realistic is instead of some interesting creature flying around the dense atmosphere of Venus, or of Jupiter, sorry, there are some nearby objects that we don't always think about. And you can even see them labeled here. Jupiter has moons. The current count of moons orbiting around Jupiter is 79. It's a big number. And I say current count because we keep finding more. So the neat thing about the moons is that they're all kind of different from each other. And many of them have a more approachable surface. They have solid surfaces that maybe if we sent a probe or even sent astronauts someday that we could actually land on. One in particular that I find fascinating is the moon Europa. You can see it labeled right here. And if you have binoculars or a telescope, you can pick out some of these moons of Jupiter, even from your backyard as well. They kind of look like bright dots that are close by the planet when you zoom in with your telescope or binoculars. But we can zoom in even more and get a view as it would look through something like, a really powerful telescope. This is the moon Europa. You might be able to tell from your screen, it's a little wobbly and a little blurry, but it does have a solid surface, and it turns out that that surface is icy. We think that the smooth surface of Europa is frozen water. It's ice. But the coolest thing that I think we're learning about Europa is that beneath that ice, there are subsurface oceans. And we know that the oceans on Earth are teeming with life. Even though it's very cold out here by Jupiter, maybe the heating between the planet and the moon itself could heat up that ocean enough to make it a place that's suitable for life. So there are already sci-fi movies out there about Europa and how it could be a candidate for life, whether it's scary life or simple life. And I'll encourage you to look at as much sci-fi as possible. But the reality is we just don't know what's happening beneath the surface of Europa. But we're in luck because NASA has a mission plan called the Europa Clipper that's actually going to go, it's an unmanned mission, so there's no human beings on it. But it's a probe that's going to get closer to Europa, fly down, not land, but fly by a number of times to help us study its surface and even subsurface a little bit more. So when we think about life out there, a lot of times we think about water, and it turns out that one of these big moons of Jupiter has a lot of water. So keep your eyes and ears open for the Europa Clipper mission, and you can kind of follow that if it's something that interests you, because it should give us a lot more information about this world. Okie dokie. So again, there are 79 moons of Jupiter, so we would probably use all of our time today just looking at all of those, but Europa is probably the one that fascinates me the most, at least. Okay, I would hang at Jupiter all day, but what do you think, Amy? Should we go to another planet?
I think we should check out Saturn.
Sure. So it looks a lot like Jupiter and Saturn are right next to each other. And I know when we think about the order of the planets, they come one right after another, but it turns out that they are a pretty big distance apart still. So here in our Stellarium sky, we can hop back and forth really quickly. In reality, it would take us a long time to go from Jupiter to Saturn, but we don't have to wait that big long amount of time. Let's just zoom on in on the planet Saturn. And what do you notice? Maybe you see that it looks a lot different than Jupiter. It's still kind of in the same category. It's a gas giant. A lot of those things I said about Jupiter's gases and liquids and solid core apply to Saturn as well. It turns out that currently Saturn's actually winning the moon battle. I told you that Jupiter has 79 moons. The current number for Saturn is 82 moons. And you can even see some of those labeled here around the planet. So it's not exactly the same. They're unique worlds, but I kind of group them together and thinking about really big gas giants that have lots of moons that orbit around them. So we're going to explore a couple moons of Saturn as well. And I'll tell you, I mentioned that there are 82 moons. Only 53 of them are named. So the International Astronomical Union has its work cut out for it to name a couple dozen more moons as well. So as you were looking at your screen, you surely noticed the rings. Turns out that some moons orbit within the rings. We don't think that those are, the best candidates for a habitable moon, but there are a couple that are close by. One in particular, Enceladus, right here. We don't have a really good zoomed in picture of it, but much like Europa, Enceladus has frozen water on its surface and subsurface oceans. The Cassini mission that went to Saturn actually did a lot of observation of the moon Enceladus, and they found these plumes of what was kind of like steam jetting off from the moon itself. And the Cassini probe was able to capture some of the chemistry of those plumes and figure out what some of that material was actually made out of. So it's exciting to think that, beneath the surface of Enceladus, there are salty oceans. They even found evidence of hydrocarbons, something that we know is really closely linked to life here on the Earth. So Enceladus is one that I think is very, very interesting. Another is going to be Titan. For some reason, it wants to keep moving me every time. So I'm going to just pause our time here. That's the best way to do it. Enceladus, I totally encourage y'all to look into it because it's a fascinating moon. But we're going to look at the second largest moon in the entire solar system right now, Titan. You notice even from here in our stellarium sky, it has a kind of orange hue. Let's zoom in and see if we can get a better look. Unfortunately, we can't really get a better look, but it's for a really cool reason. Titan, it turns out, is the only moon in the entire solar system that we know of that has a dense atmosphere. So that orange stuff you're looking at there, that's not the surface itself. It's really, really thick clouds that surround Titan. Now, the neat thing is the Huygens probe from the Cassini mission was able to help us learn a little bit more about Titan. And it turns out that on its surface, it has really interesting features. Things like lakes and rivers and oceans and mountains and valleys. And that sounds really similar to our home planet, but they operate a little bit differently. Instead of being lakes and rivers and oceans of water like we have here on Earth, there's liquid methane on the surface of Titan. So methane, we usually see it as a gas here on Earth. Titan and Saturn are so far away from the sun that they tend to be very cold, so that methane is able to be condensed into a liquid. So anyway, it's very exciting that we see those sort of features on this moon, because maybe there is some sort of life that could exist in this extreme environment. And the topography, the way that the planet looks, is similar to something like the early Earth. So even though the chemistry is a little bit different, Titan is one of those places where we're interested in learning more and more about it. And I'll plug one more time, I told you about the Europa Clipper that's going to visit that moon of Jupiter. There is a new Frontiers mission from NASA that's going to be headed out, I think in 2026, if everything goes according to plan, which, sometimes it doesn't. It's called the Dragonfly. And it's a robotic spacecraft that actually looks like a little quad helicopter that's going to go down through the atmosphere, skate along the surface to help us take more scientific measurements and readings of what exactly is going on Titan. So I know it's maybe not super duper satisfying to hear there's no life here and there's no life there. But the exciting thing is we are trying our best to learn more about these worlds and to get a bigger base of knowledge to help us understand them. So again, we didn't have time to look at all of the moons of Saturn or all of the moons of Jupiter, but those are just a couple of options that we think are pretty exciting. So for now, we'll say goodbye to Saturn.
And Nick, while you're doing that, I've been trying to keep an eye on the Q&A. We have a lot of questions coming in. I know we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but and I apologize if I'm saying this person's name wrong. Isla is what it looks like, asked if we're ever able to see Saturn in the night sky without binoculars or telescopes. And the answer is yes. You can see Saturn with just your eyes. So what Stellarium is representing on your screen right now are things that you can see with just your own eyes. You don't need binoculars or a telescope. Now, not that zoomed in view of Saturn. Do not expect to look in the night sky and see all those moons with just your eyes. But with just your eyes, you can see Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. You just have to go out at the right time, which means right now you're gonna have to stay up pretty late or get up really early.
Really great question. So you mentioned a third planet right then, Amy.
Yeah, let's take a quick look if we could at Mars. And we're running a little low on time, so Mars is a very explored planet. Now, humans have never been there. As we like to say, Matt Damon has not been to Mars. Only in science fiction have humans been to Mars. But we've sent a lot of robotic spacecraft there. There, for example, is a rover you may have heard of called Curiosity. And it has found evidence that Mars in the past was a suitable place for life. That does not mean that there necessarily was life. It's just that in the past, it looks like there were conditions that were possible for life. Mars is thought to have been different in the past, warmer and wetter. It's now a cold desert world.
But it's still exciting because we're going to go back there. More robotic spacecraft. The newly named Perseverance rover is going to land there before too long and help us study its surface more, study its thin atmosphere, try to figure out about its history. And then there are plans to send human beings to Mars within the next couple of decades. So I hope some of you that are watching are, future astronauts. Maybe it'll be you that's the first to land on Mars. It is within what we call a habitable zone. It's an area around a star where astronomers think planets like Earth could exist, that could have life on them. So you see that even if it's kind of on the edge, it's one of those exciting options for us. So as Amy mentioned, we have thoroughly explored Mars, but I kind of think there's always more to explore. So speaking of habitable zones, Amy, we have a habitable zone around our star, but what happens with other stars?
Yeah, so we've been focused a lot on possibilities for life in our own solar system. So let's just back up for a second and define solar system, because sometimes people get the words solar system, galaxy, and universe kind of all conflated with each other. Solar system is a very specific term. Solar means sun. Solar system is the sun's system. So when we talk about our solar system, we mean our sun, our star, the one we see in the daytime, and all the things it holds in with its gravity. And that includes Earth, the other planets you know and love, 5 dwarf planets, a bunch of moons, asteroids, and so on, comets. All those stars you see at night, they are not in our solar system. They are in our Milky Way galaxy. And it turns out a lot of those stars are basically their own solar systems. And Nick has just popped up a view of some of the stars that are known to have their own planets, at least one planet. Now, if it's a planet around a star that's not our sun, we call it an exoplanet. And as of yesterday, there were 4,152 confirmed exoplanets. So presumably there are a whole lot more exoplanets out there, but that's how many have been discovered. And we've been discovering them since the 1990s. Okay, and then wanted to mention just one of the ways that we've discovered exoplanets. There are more than one way, but the main way that most of the exoplanets have been discovered is called the transit method. A transit, it's kind of like a mini eclipse, and Nick is going to bring up something to help show you that. Transits happen in our own solar system, by the way. From Earth's point of view, there are 2 planets that orbit the sun in closer than we do, Mercury and Venus. And every once in a while, Mercury or Venus will appear to pass in front of or transit the sun, just like that, just like Nick is showing on his screen. And when that happens, the light that we see from the sun dips just a tiny light, tiny little bit. It's sort of like a mini eclipse. And if you look at the bottom half of your screen, you see that brightness. The graph is showing how the brightness dips every time the planet goes in front. It also dips a little bit when it goes behind because you're not seeing as much reflected light from the planet itself. Well, this is the main way that planets have been discovered around other stars. So we can have telescopes that look at other stars and notice periodic dips in their brightness that might indicate that a planet is passing in front of them. And so you can see this in this video that Nick is showing. And if you're curious to learn more about exoplanets and ways of discovering them, there is a NASA website that is really nicely put together, and it's exoplanets.nasa.gov. And I think we'll be able to pop up that URL in the chat at some point. There it goes. Okay, and Nick, we are just about out of time, but if you have any questions that you want to answer.
Sure, yeah, let's try to answer a couple of them since there are so many good ones.
Okay, while you're looking, let me answer a fun one that somebody asked about the robot behind me. I have more than a couple. This is Kelvin. Kelvin, and behind Nick as well is the spokespot for the annual North Carolina Science Festival that happens through the entire month of April every single year. We just had our 10th anniversary. This year it had to be the virtual Science Festival, but you can still find a lot of the activities online by going to ncsciencefestival.org. And I think we might be able to pop up a version of that URL in the chat if you want to learn more. So Kelvin is the spokespot. North Carolina has the best science festival anywhere in the universe, I am convinced. All right, Nick, do you see any that you want to take? Any questions?
Yeah, I want to take all of them, but I have to pick. So just to clear something up, that's probably the second most commonly asked question that we get in the planetarium. Amy mentioned dwarf planets. So there's a question in here from Christina that says, is Pluto a planet? We'll probably have a whole session talking all about this. And the answer is not a planet. We call it a dwarf planet. Now, you might have learned in school, or your parents might have learned in school, that there were 9 planets and Pluto kind of got kicked out of the club. Basically, all that happened is human beings, we changed our definition of what it means to be a planet. So Pluto didn't blow up. It didn't go away. It's still out there. We're still very interested in it. It just fits better into a new category. And it has to do not so much exactly with its size or how far away it is, with how other objects out there near Pluto interact with it. So it fits a lot better into a category of objects that we now call dwarf planets or Kuiper belt objects. So I know that bums some of us out when we think about Pluto not being a planet, but don't worry, Pluto doesn't mind what we call it. And we gave it some love. The New Horizons spacecraft flew by there in 2015, and we learned a lot more about it. So I still love Pluto, and I know many of you are curious about that.
Okay, and Nick, I know we have another poll question that we could pop up. Are we ready for that?
Yeah, I think so. Earlier we talked about whether or not life exists somewhere else, and we said, unfortunately, we haven't found evidence of it, but we kind of want to see what you think now that we talked about some of these places. Do you think that there's life elsewhere in the universe? It's a yes or no question, and this is more of an opinion. So what I always like to think as you're trying to answer this is that, we live on a planet that's part of a solar system, that's part of a galaxy that has over 200 billion stars. And astronomers think that on average, each of those stars could have a planet. So maybe there's 200 billion planets or even more in our galaxy. And our Milky Way galaxy is just one of billions of other galaxies. So the numbers get really big. The universe is a really big place. And it's been said that if there isn't life out there beyond the Earth, then it's an awful waste of space. So I don't want that to influence your vote here, but it's a big universe, and there are lots of possibilities. So
I think I know how you voted, Nick.
Yeah, sorry, I gave it away, didn't I?
And it looks like 88% of you think that yes, there is life elsewhere in the universe, and a few of you think not, think maybe only on Earth. And well, maybe in our lifetimes we'll find out if possibly the answer is yes. And a shameless plug, I hope you all will join us next week. Tuesday, we'll be looking at spring skies. And Thursday, we will be talking about how to see the International Space Station in the sky.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I hope we've sparked your curiosity a little bit on this Thursday. If you want more virtual programs like this, please visit moreheadplanetarium.org and check out our Morehead at Home section. That'll give you more information about what sort of things we're doing in this time from home. And if you want to follow us on social media, feel free to look at our Twitter, which is Morehead Planet, @MoreheadPlanet, or our Instagram or Facebook, just search Morehead Planetarium. Last thing, these sessions are going to be posted afterwards on YouTube. So if you ever want to go back and reference them or watch it again because you loved it so much, you can do that. So just search for Morehead Planetarium on YouTube. But otherwise, we will see y'all next week. Happy stargazing.
Bye, you all.